And it's such an honor, of course, to introduce Dr. Jill Biden tonight for a discussion of her new book, as you know from the video and from the photo up there. It's called Where the Light Enters, Building a Family, Discovering Myself. Now, most of you, and most of America, know Jill Biden as our former and very much admired Second Lady of the United States. She served in that role for 8 years during the Obama administration. And let's just say that there are a lot of people across our country, including in this room, I think, at this very moment, who are hoping that she returns to the White House a couple of Januaries from now. In a slightly different role. And I expect that there's one person in particular in this room who, above all, may have something to do with that. And so we'd like to welcome Vice President Biden as well this evening. Thank you. Now, one of the most notable things about Dr. Biden's tenure as Second Lady was that she fulfilled the many often hidden responsibilities, but serious responsibilities as the spouse of the Vice President while maintaining her professional career as a professor at Northern Virginia Community College. From her office in the White House, she worked tirelessly, often alongside Michelle Obama, often alongside President Obama and Vice President Biden, to advance the Obama policy agenda, and also to protect and strengthen our democratic and civic values. But a few times a week, she left the premises to cross the river to Virginia, where some of her students knew her only as Dr. B, completely unaware of her parallel existence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That she could operate so brilliantly and so gracefully in two distinct worlds at the same time is a testament to the woman and human being that she is. Dr. Biden's life story, as she recounts in her touching and thoughtful memoir, has not been a fairy tale throughout, much as she hoped it would be as a child growing up in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. But it was from living through ups and downs, successes and failures, triumphs and heartbreaking grief, that she was able to find her true love and life partner, a dashing young senator from Delaware named Joe Biden, her sense of purpose as an independent professional woman and as a teacher, and her unwavering devotion to family and country. The title of the book, as she mentions in the video, Where the Light Enters, will be familiar to readers of the poet Rumi, and will be a phrase that becomes etched in your minds as you follow Dr. Biden through the pages of her life's journey. What a privilege it is for all of us tonight to be with her and hear about her book and her life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jill Biden.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that. Thank you. Wow. It's very emotional. Good evening, and thank you for joining me for this very special evening for me. Journalist Mignon McLaughlin said, "A successful marriage requires falling in love many times, always with the same person." In this book, I write about the first time I fell in love with Joe, but there have been so many times. Watching his courage over the years, the many roles he's played, father, friend, husband and son, senator and vice president, has inspired me again and again. Even today, I see a different side of him, talking to people and doing what he loves most. And I fall in love with him all over again. Thank you, Joe. I'm also joined this evening by our daughter Ashley and my granddaughter Maisie and my niece, Missy. And family and friends, I have my Nova colleagues. I see them over there. Hi, Nova. And many friends who have kept me sane, like my friends from my bar class. It's not like bar in drinking, it's bar in exercise. So anyway, the many people here who have made this moment possible. And thank you to my beloved team, Jill, all the people that I've worked with over the past, 11 years who are here tonight to support me. You know, it's a little surreal to be here to talk about this book. And usually I'm sitting where you are to hear many of the extraordinary authors Politics and Prose brings to Washington. So, Lissa, thank you for your friendship and for your literary leadership. Thank you very much. This book was a little dreamlike to write as well. Growing up, I never imagined that I would write something like this. Being vulnerable in front of such a large audience is not really my nature. But then, I never imagined that I would marry a United States senator or become second lady either. So growing up in an idyllic suburb of Philadelphia, a young, slightly rebellious high schooler, rooting for the Phillies and working during the summers to get money for college at the Jersey Shore, I really only wanted two things. And that was a marriage like my parents, strong and loving and full of laughter. And I wanted a career. As it turned out, I got both. But the path to getting both was just a little meandering. And that's really what this book is all about. A strange and exciting and unexpected journey. And the family that made it possible and made it all worth it. When Joe and I got married, he told me, "Jill, your life will never change." Now, I don't want to spoil the book for you, but he was wrong. My life changed and changed and changed and is still changing as we speak. And that's probably true for most of you as well. But let's face it, change isn't always fun. It's hard sometimes. But sometimes that change makes us who we are. So I'd like to read two excerpts from my book. And so this is the first one. It's hard to know what you owe a spouse who died before you came along. A lot of people wrestle with the fact that the love of their lives loved someone else first, and perhaps never stopped loving that person. Some people feel jealousy. Some people feel inadequate. Some people let questions of what might have been eat away at their mind, at their peace of mind. As President Theodore Roosevelt is rumored to have said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." I understand those complicated emotions, but I have never felt threatened by Nelia. Joe has always made sure that I feel his love for me. In fact, he often jokes that he loves me more than I love him. How can he measure that? I don't know, but from the beginning, I knew, and this is what I said to Joe, I knew that if he could love Nelia that deeply, that completely, then maybe I could be loved that completely too. And that this could be the love that I had been looking for, the kind of love my parents had. Joe used to tell the boys that Mommy sent Jill to us. He believed it, so the boys did as well. How else could they make any sense of the injustice of losing their mother and sister? They had to have faith that the incredible love Nelia had for them could keep going, could somehow bring them a person who would love them as much as they needed. The boys clung to that faith as they grew up. It was a gift that Joe gave them, a way to make sense of the world. I didn't want Nelia's memory to be hidden away. I didn't want the boys to think that they had to choose between us or feel like they had to put aside that part of themselves. And so we made space for her. We didn't live in the home that Nelia and Joe shared, but she was there nonetheless. We kept her pictures displayed around the house. She reappeared in Joe's stories. I knew the boys carried a piece of her with them, and I caught glimpses of what I knew must be her laugh, the crinkle of her nose, the curve of her brow in their faces. I wanted Joe to remind them over and over again just how much she loved them, because she would always be their mother. There was no us without her. Every December 18th, the day of the accident, we made the world stop. Joe stayed home from work, and the boys went in late to school. We went together to the 7 a.m. Mass at our parish, St. Joseph's Church, Catholic Church in Wilmington. After that, Joe and the boys would go to the cemetery, while I went home and prepared coffee, bagels, fruit, and yogurt for the extended family, Jack and Val, my mom and dada, and whoever else wanted to come by. Joe had told me that Nelia loved white roses, so I would buy a grave blanket and add 3 white roses with baby's breath, one for Joe, Hunter, and Bo. I put it in the back of Joe's car so that he didn't have to think about it. When they got to the cemetery, he and the boys could share their moments and memories together. For years, I never joined them. It was their time with Nelia. But the year after Bo died, for the first time, I went with Joe. I held his hand as we stood there in the chilly December morning, and I thought of the words I knew were spoken at her eulogy. Death lies on her like an untimely frost, upon the sweetest flower of all the field. I thought about the family we had made together, the 3 of us. I owe her so much, my loyalty, my gratitude for the gift of these beautiful boys, and yes, my love. And if indeed she had sent me, I hope she's grateful she did. Here's the second one. And Ashley, since you're here tonight, I chose this for you. Joe also loves to tell the story about the Battle of the Headbands. Back in the 80s, when everyone wore headbands, I had a whole rack of them in my bathroom. I had every color in the rainbow: plaid, gingham, with bows, without bows. It may sound strange now, but it was very fashionable at the time. Ashley would go in there and take them for herself without asking. As Joe tells it, he said, I'd wake up in the morning and there would be the 2 of them going, "It's my headband. No, it's my headband." I can't say I agree completely with his retelling, but I admit I was frustrated by my constantly disappearing hair accessories. During Ashley's teenage years, I kept a pair of running shoes by the front door. Whenever she and I would get into an argument, I put on those shoes and go running to calm myself down. We argued so much, I became a marathon runner. It wasn't the same with Joe. He doted on her, and their personalities never clashed the way ours did. Perhaps it was that mother-daughter thing, but not one I recognized at all. My relationship with my mother was so different. Believe me, I'd tell her, when you have a child, I hope she's a girl so she can put you through what you've put me through. All of this meant I suddenly had a new appreciation for my father. This child was obviously his perfect revenge. Obstinate and strong-willed, she'd come in after her curfew or sometimes cut school. She was stubborn and rebellious like I was, though she never got into any serious trouble. I tried to channel my mother's parenting, calm, cool-headed, always nurturing. But it was my father's style I reverted to most often, one of tough love. While my relationship with Ashley was different from the ones I had with the boys, it was just that. Different, not more or less. I saw myself in Bo and Hunter too, and my relationship with each of them was unique. Bo had my sense of humor completely. Whenever he started in his chopped way, "Mom, Mom, Mom," I knew something funny was about to come out of his mouth. The two of us were the only ones who would pick on Joe, and he loved that I would say things to his dad that no one else dared. But it wasn't just our personality traits that overlapped. With his blonde hair and blue eyes, people always remarked on how we looked alike. "You take after your mom," strangers would tell us when we were together, and we would smile and share a secret look, never correcting them. In Hunt, I had a fellow scholar and writer. He loves books and poetry, just like his English professor mother. He's the one I want to call when I finish a heartbreaking novel or need a recommendation of a good book to read. He has insight and wisdom and makes me see things through a different prism. And though he's my most courageous child, I also feel the most protective of him because I know that he shares my guarded emotional side. We're not the politicians of the family, but we know how to put our strengths to work for what we believe. He came with me to provide aid after Hurricane Katrina, and we visited the Kibera slum in Kenya together. Like me, he can't see others suffering without wanting to step in. When he sees someone hurting, he always finds a way to help. Biology or no, I'm a part of all my kids, and they are a part of me. I've loved them each in different ways, and I've often loved them unevenly. My love is constantly undulating, moving and changing and growing, flowing to where it's needed and back again. And in the end, though it's uneven, it equals out. At least that's my hope, and I had reason to believe it worked. Hunt once alleviated some of my fears. "You know, Mom," he told me, "I never doubted that you loved us the same as you did Ashley." When I asked him why, he said, "Because you yelled at her just like you yelled at us." Again, I want to thank all of you for being here together. It really means a lot to me. And now it's my pleasure to sit down with Tracy Pollan, a flexitarian, and she'll explain what that means, and the author of multiple award-winning cookbooks. the Pollen family table. And her sisters, Dana and Laurie, are with her as well. So they're right there. Her latest book, Mostly Plants, was written with her family and is revolutionizing the way we eat, cook, and live. And while I'm not sure that I'm going to be spending too much time in the kitchen in the coming months, I look forward to making your amped up nachos. And Joe, I know you're gonna love them because they're filled with kale and avocado. Tracy, thank you for sharing this evening with me, from work-life balance to motherhood and living defiantly through illness. I know we're gonna have a lot to talk about. Tracy?
Hello. First of all, what I want to say first is that I absolutely love this book. I decided I was going to read it over a little bit of time, and I picked it up, and I read the entire thing in one sitting. I loved it that much.
Thank you very much.
And as I was reading it, I felt myself relating to you in so many ways. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, that's me. She's writing about me. Oh wait, that's me too. And then what I realized was that so many women relate to you and your story. And it wasn't just me. You were telling all of our stories through your own. And so I was just curious, what do you hope that people take away from this book?
Well, the one thing I hope everybody who is here or reads the book takes away is that, nowadays, well, when I was growing up, there was the nuclear family, the mom, the dad, and the kids. But now, families are so different. There's single moms, there's single dads, there's gay couples with children, there's interracial marriage. There's so many different types of families now that people get to define themselves. And the one thing, the common denominator, I think, for all families, and this is what I hear from my students as well who write about their families all the time, is really the common denominator is love. And I think if you think of the one thing that anybody here in the audience, what you say about your own families, you would say the one thing that you all possess is love. Love for your children, your spouses, your partners.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
The other thing that occurred to me is you have lived so much of your life in the public eye, and we all feel like we know so much about you, but then I realized that you actually seem to be a very, very private person. And it's sort of a funny dichotomy. I personally can relate to that, and I've also been someone in the public eye for most of my life. And when I picture myself writing a book, really kind of exposing all of that about myself, it's daunting. And I was just curious if this was a difficult choice for you to decide to share sort of the most intimate details of your life.
Well, it was interesting. The first book, when I thought about writing a book when we were in our administration, it was because I had had such an incredible experience with traveling all over the world, all over this country, and meeting so many amazing, resilient people, from Dr. Mukwege at the Panzi Hospital in the Congo, to women in Guatemala who were making bracelets to get money so their families could survive. And so I went to the publisher and I said, I want to write about military families, all these people I've met. And they said, no, we want you to write a book that is really unique to you, a story only you can tell. So I started thinking about it, and I started writing down a couple stories. I'm a real paper and pencil person. It's just like something hits me, and I've got to sit down and write it. And so then I went back to them, and I said, okay, here are some of the stories about my life, and they loved the stories.
Right.
And they especially loved the bikini story, which,
That was a great story.
So for those of you who will read it, it's about politics and keeping Joe in line. And, well, should I explain it? I think he's nervous.
It's a funny story.
So, during one of the campaign years, people wanted Joe to run for president. I was against it. And I told Joe I was against it before these advisors came over to our house. And I knew why they were coming. They wanted to try to talk him into it. So I was down at our pool on the lower level, and I could hear them upstairs, and they were like, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. And I was getting madder and madder, I was so angry. So I walked into the house. The first thing I saw was a magic marker. So I had a two-piece bathing suit on, so I wrote no on my stomach. And I walked through the meeting. So anyway, they got the message.
I was going to say, I think you made your point. You spoke, we saw this in the video, which was beautiful. At the beginning of the book, you quote the poem, The Childhood Friends by Rumi. And the title of your book is taken from that poem. But there's one line in the book that I was just very curious about. Don't turn your head. Keep looking at the bandaged place. And I was just curious, it seems very significant to you, and I'm curious what that specific line means to you.
Well, the bandaged place, I think, is making yourself, when you are vulnerable, when you're hurting, when you experience loss like we have in our family, what that means is you're looking at the wound, at the scar. And the poem ends, the Rumi poem, don't believe for a moment that you're healing yourself. And that's what I found through loss, is that I never could have made it through without friends and family, many, many, many of you in this room who supported me throughout and supported Joe. And, with your notes and your cards and your love and your caring. And I think really, I teach at a community college, and I feel the same way about my school, about the community college, that really it's a larger community, and it's also just helping one another get through the tough times, and whether that's your English class, or whether that's through loss, or whether that's through illness, or whatever you're going through. I think it's that sense of community that helps us, that we lean on one another, and that's what helps us to get through.
You also talk a lot about your close relationship with your parents and your sisters growing up. And you refer to this as the circle of loyalty, which I thought was beautiful. And then later you write about Joe and the boys, and you say, when all the others turn their backs and walk away, you can count on me to stay. That was their bond, one of shared memories, of grief, of absolute trust. It was them against the world, and they were asking me to join that sacred circle. And it seems like with Joe and the boys, you found something that was very close to the relationship that you had with both your parents and your sisters. And it seems like this is a very strong theme that seems to run through your life. And I'm just curious, when creating these kinds of relationships in your life, how did that inform you once you got to Washington? Did it help you in terms of navigating those new waters?
Oh, sure. I mean, our family, I think, is very close. And when I met Joe, I felt that Joe and Bo and Hunter had a very close circle. And then I felt that love as they opened up that circle and allowed me to come in. And I think that our family is, we've always done everything together. We've sort of circled the wagons, and I think when you're in public life, you need that. You need that loyalty, you need that love, that caring, and so as we go forward in our next journey, we'll do like we've always done. We're going to, once again, lean on one another, support one another, and I think loyalty is really an important trait, and so I think, and I had that growing up with my own sisters. And I tell the story in the book that I'm the oldest of the 5 girls. And so my younger sister came home and said to me, she was crying, and she said, Jill, Drew always keeps throwing worms on me at the bus stop. And she was crying about it. And I said, all right, so this was a bully in our neighborhood. So I went up the hill, Gray Horse Road, down Cowbell, and I went up to his house, and I knocked on the door, and he opened the door, and I pulled back, and I punched him right in the face. And I said, don't you ever throw worms on my sister again. And then I was so scared, I ran all the way home. And my father was home, and I ran in and I said, Daddy, I just punched Drew in the nose. And he said, good for you, Jilly Bean. So it was that kind of loyalty that I grew up with. I mean, we took care of one another. And I'm sure that's true of you and your siblings. And is that true of you? And did you ever do that for your sisters?
Very true.
Yeah?
Yes, we definitely have an us against the world.
Do you have a worm story?
You can say anything about me, but don't say anything about my sisters.
Yeah.
The other thing you talk about a lot is your parents' deep, abiding love for one another. And you write very beautifully. You say their love, their loyalty, their unflinching devotion to each other. That was the small request I made to the universe. Give me a love like theirs. Give me a family of my own. And I was just curious, how did you find what you were looking for in your relationship with Joe? Are there similarities between your parents'
There were a lot of
relationship?
similarities. We grew up in middle class, and Joe's mom stayed home, my mom stayed home. We were very sort of Leave It to Beaver kind of family. I mean, it was truly idyllic. When you think about our summers were, you opened the door at 8 o'clock, you ran out, and your mother didn't see you till the street lights went on. And so it was just, that's what we grew up with. And so the values, I always felt secure. I always felt loved unconditionally. My parents gave that to me, that gift. And so when I became an instant mother, I sort of reached back. I reached back to what I knew and what I had growing up as a young girl, and knowing how secure my parents made me feel. So when we got married, I had been teaching. I took off 2 years because I wanted to establish myself as their mom. And so one of the things I did, I would go in and volunteer in their school. And they were so proud. They would bring in their friends when I'd be in the library shelving books. And, there's my mom, there's my mom. So I think, Joe, we worked hard at it. And I think the boys always felt secure and loved. And then Ashley came along, and I think they never doubted that, it was just a loving family, like all of you who have worked so hard. It's hard work to establish your values and your morals. So that's what we tried to do.
Yeah.
Oh, the kids, the boys actually were the ones who said to Joe, "We think we should marry Jill." And they did. I mean, that's what happened. They went into Joe. He was shaving in the bathroom, and so when we got married, we went up to New York at the UN Chapel, and it was so funny. We went to get our marriage license, and they were calling bidden, and so I knew like nobody recognized Joe, and and when we got married, we went. Joe and I, the priest was there. We went to walk up to the altar. And the boys just got up and walked right up with us. I mean, we were getting married as a family, and we did, and that was really, it was just beautiful, and they continued that. I mean, they 1 year after we were married, they gave me their mother's wedding ring. So they wanted me to have it. It's just, they were so thoughtful and loving, and still are.
One of my favorite chapters in the book, you talk about finding your voice. Mm-hmm. And you start off by talking about how you are an introvert, naturally, and that public speaking doesn't necessarily come naturally to you, which is very, very hard for me to believe, given how beautifully you speak. But I'm just curious if you can tell us all a little bit, because you've obviously overcome those obstacles, and so for so many of us, it's such a difficult thing to get up in front of a crowd.
I used to be scared to death, and during Joe's Senate campaigns, I would speak, but my voice would shake. I mean, I would not sleep the night before. I was so nervous about getting up in front of a crowd. And but then when we were elected vice president, I thought, you know what? I have been given such a platform, and I can talk about all my passions, all the things that I love, education, community colleges, military families. And I thought, I cannot waste this platform, and I better get better at this. So I practiced, and I made myself, because, I was used to, speaking to, 25 students in a classroom. But then as vice president, I was speaking to hundreds and sometimes thousands of people when I stood up. So I knew I had to push myself. And I don't know, I try to take, and I try to take that lesson to my students as well, to say, take risks, push yourselves, try to be better. That's the one message I try to give them confidence. Because I think it doesn't matter whether they learn the thesis statement or know how to do a research paper, although my dean is here, so yes, Jimmy, that does matter. But I think if I can give them confidence, that's what it's all about. And Joe was so instrumental, and Joe's sister actually was a mentor to me, because she had been through many campaigns. And so Val was really wonderful to me.
Yeah, you talk about that in the book. Another thing that, you've spoken a lot, you're very open and public about a lot of the tragedy that you have had in your life, the accident that preceded your relationship with Joe, Beau's illness, and then his death. You talk about the horrible fire that destroyed your family home. You show so much resilience, and I'm just curious if you have any advice about how you could help someone going through similar tough times, and where you find that strength and resilience.
Well, I think after Beau died, Joe and I, had to find purpose in our lives, and we said to ourselves, what would Beau want us to do? And I think probably if I asked this audience how many of you have lost someone you've loved to cancer, or you're maybe going through a diagnosis right now yourselves, everyone has been touched by it. And Joe and I realized that. And Barack and Michelle were so wonderful to us through the whole illness. And then Barack made Joe head of the Cancer Moonshot to bring all the federal government agencies together to break down the silos and have them all working to change cancer as we know it. And then once we got out of the White House, we formed the Biden Cancer Initiative. And I travel all over the country, as does Joe. And we try to help families. And Joe meets with a lot of the doctors and tries to work with agencies and foundations. My job is to work with families and patients and victims of cancer and survivors. And I think you have to find purpose in your life. And that's what we've really tried hard to do. So no matter where this new journey takes me and takes Joe, we will always, no matter what, still work on defeating cancer. So that's
amazing. You also talk about Joe's optimism, and that's been something that's helped you through. And I ask that because I too have a famously optimistic husband. And sometimes it's what keeps me going. And other times I just want to say, just shut up and let me be morose.
I never feel that way, right, Joe?
Do you ever just want to say, I'm sad, I need to be in this place?
Yeah, well, I've talked about that, and I actually talked about it this week a lot. People grieve differently, and Joe really has a very strong faith. He practices his faith. Bo had a very strong faith, as do the rest of the members of my family. But I believe so strongly that Bo was going to live. I just felt, they said only, 1% with glioblastoma will live. And I felt like Bo was so special. He was going to be that 1%. I just felt it in my heart. And then when he died, and I had prayed so hard that he would live. And so I sort of backed away from my faith because I couldn't get over it. I thought, God's going to let him live. And we were in South Carolina about 2 weeks ago, and I was joking with Joe, in my church, and I'm Protestant, Joe's Catholic, but in both of our churches, you go to church and you sit there like so quietly, and your hands at your side, everything's quiet. But we went to a black church, and there was so much joy and singing, and it was just like so welcoming. And the woman next to me, I didn't know her. I mean, the woman next to me put her hand on my hand, and she said, Jill, I want to be your prayer partner. And it sort of, took my breath away. I thought, prayer partner? What is that? I don't even know what that is. But I thought it was so kind. And I thought that was sort of a sign like, Jill, it's been 4 years. It's time for you to come back. And so she's actually called me. And so I'm trying to work my way back to religion and to faith and to prayer. Because the one thing I have learned is that I've met so many people who suffer from cancer who have prayed for me and for Joe and for our family, that I feel that now I owe them my prayers. And Tracy, I'm sure that you feel the same way, probably all the prayers that your family has gotten through your husband's illness. And are you open to talking about that? Or? You may not be, that's okay.
No, it's okay.
She's like, don't put me on the spot.
I mean, you just get so much strength from the people. Uh-huh. It is that positivity, and it is that optimism that, not only that you get from yourself and from your spouse, but from everybody around you. And there's just something that very, very buoying about people around you that don't even know you, that just are wishing the best for you. And it's hopefully everybody has something like that in their lives, but it really does help you get through the tough times.
Right.
The other thing that seems so important to you is your decision to go back to work, to get your degrees, to become a doctor. And it's obviously something that is so important to you. And then you later made history by becoming the only second lady to hold a full-time job outside of the White House. It's really... And I have to say, my favorite image in the book is picturing the Secret Service agents dressed as students. It's priceless. So my last question before we get to these questions is, will you make history again and become the first lady to work outside the White House?
I would love, I mean, we're not taking anything for granted, but if it ever did occur, I would love to still keep teaching. If my job's still open, I don't know.
So we have some questions from the audience. All right. What was a moment when you doubted yourself, and how did you push through it?
Oh, gosh. I guess, I don't know. I guess that moment when Joe was chosen to be vice president, and actually he had taken me, I was teaching, it was in August, my school semester had started, and he took me to a root canal because I'm so afraid of, getting the shots and everything. So we were at the dentist, and Barack called while I was in the chair. And Joe was waiting for me, and I walked out, and Joe said, Jill, I have get in the car, I have something to tell you. And he told me that Barack had called and had asked Joe to be vice president. And of course I was so excited, but yet I couldn't smile. My my face was all from the Novocaine. But I have to say, it was daunting. It was really daunting to think, oh my God, one phone call, and boy, our lives completely changed. And so I did doubt whether I could be really on a national stage. And I mean, you can imagine, here I am, an English teacher, and my life completely changed. But I have to say, I mean, Joe has always believed in me. He pushes me. He says, you can do this. And he's been amazing. So, Joe, thank you.
Somebody wants to know, what is your favorite White House memory?
Well, it's another Joe story, so get ready. We had so many incredible memories. I mean, from election night to inauguration, just every day. There was you could never be tired and say, oh, I'm going to stay home tonight, because every night was something new and exciting, and different people that you met or places you'd go. But I have to tell you, near the end of our administration, Barack called me and he said, Jill, I want to give Joe the Medal of Freedom, and I don't want anybody to know about it. And I said, okay, I promise you, I will keep it a secret. So he said, you make the list of people from your family and friends that you want there, and we're going to do a ceremony. And I can remember waking up that morning, I was going to teach, and I looked at Joe, and I was so excited, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be one of the best days of your life. And so I went and I taught that day. Then I changed in the bathroom like I usually do. And I went to the White House, and Joe walked in not knowing anything was going to happen. And Barack called him up on the stage, and he gave him the Medal of Freedom. And Joe was shocked. He was so stunned by it. And just the happiness I felt for Joe at that moment was just incredible. Wasn't it, Ashley?
What is your advice for stepmoms?
Oh, stepmoms. Well, I think it's hard if there is another spouse, an ex-spouse, to blend the family. I didn't actually have someone. I mean, I had Nelia, but she was deceased, so I wasn't competing at all. I never felt I was competing. So I think the advice I have to give is just love those kids. Just shower them with love. And I think that, like the title of my book, that's the whole thesis through my book, that love makes a family. So you can make that family through your love.
Someone wants to know, what's the hardest part of being in the public eye?
Oh, I think it's probably the privacy factor. I mean, when I go to the supermarket, I can see people looking in my cart. So I have to be careful what I buy and when. I send my sister Bonnie to Costco to pick up the personal items.
That's what sisters are for.
That's what sisters are for.
Someone wants to know, if you were to be First Lady, what issue would be closest to your heart?
Well, that's easy for me. It's education, education, education.
What have you learned about America from working at a community college?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have here? I'm a big proponent of community colleges. I travel all over this country fighting for free community college, and my students keep saying, do it now. But, community colleges are just such special places, and I think the faculty really, I think they're incredible teachers. It's a nurturing environment. We have so many wraparound services. It's less expensive for kids. I try to tell kids now that are going to college, you can go to community college for 2 years, and then you can slide right into a 4-year college as a junior and save so much money and get such an incredible education. So I can't say enough. And my students, I have to tell you, they're amazing. They're working, sometimes 1 or 2 jobs. They have children. They're going to school. Sometimes they work all night, and they come into my class at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're just ready to go. And good morning, Dr. B. And they come up to me at the end of class, and they say, thank you for teaching me today. I mean, they just amaze me. But I have a funny story. Not all my students know that I was second lady or in the administration, and I have a story that I love to tell because some people find it hard to believe. But when I went to teach at Nova, it was the end of the first semester, and not everybody knew, that I was second lady. In fact, very few of my students knew it because I never discussed politics. I'm always an English teacher there. And so I was doing grade conferences. It was in May, and this young woman comes in, and she walks in, and she says, Dr. B, I saw you on the TV last night with Michelle Obama. And I said, yes. And she said, and I said to my mom, come here, that's my English teacher. And her mother said, that's not your English teacher, that's the second lady of the United States. So, it still remains that way to this day. So, but I love that they accept me as their, well, she didn't know, but, that they accept me as their English teacher.
Well, what you just said, actually, I think this is the question that so many of us want to know. What is your relationship like with Michelle?
Well, it's warm and loving. What you see with Michelle is exactly how she is in her personal relationships. And Joe and I were really blessed with that relationship, the 4 of us. You know, it started out, we didn't know each other terribly well, but like any relationship that you have in life, it starts out, you know, that you get to know each other more and more. And then eventually it became a relationship of true love and respect. And I know that Joe talks to Barack. They do have that bromance that they, you know, that they talk about. And I talked to Michelle just about, I guess, 2 weeks ago. And Maisie, who's here, goes to school with Sasha, and they play on the same sports teams. And so I think that's going forward what we need more of, you know, for people to come together and to work together and be united and be a government that really with people just from both sides of the aisle just working together. And that's, I think, what we're going to try to do, right, Joe?
Well, that would be amazing. I would be very happy. So I just have one other question. You obviously spend so much time with your family, and one theme that also comes up a lot in that I found very interesting was food. You talk about your family meals when you were growing up, and then you talk about your Sunday suppers that you kept as a, you know, that was something that you've done all throughout your married life. So I want to know, what is your perfect menu for your family meal?
Well, it's not mine, it's Joe's. He wants anything with red sauce. So it's a good thing, you know, my grandfather was Dominic Giacoppa, so I have a little bit of knowledge about red sauce. But it's usually when the kids come over, I don't know, Maisie, what do you think? I usually make like chicken parmesan, spaghetti, always ice cream. You know that about Joe, he always has to have ice cream. And so it's like you said, it's sort of flexitarian. I prefer vegetables, and so I try to get in the vegetables as much as I can. So even though he has the pasta, I like to have
red sauce on vegetables.
Yes, yeah. Or I just make the vegetables. I just love to eat, you know, asparagus and broccoli and cauliflower and just all the things that you write about in your book. So now, Joe, I have to ask all of the people in my family whether they're going to eat maybe one of Tracy's vegetarian meals. What do you think? Yeah.
Well, I just have to say, it has been such a pleasure talking to you, and I just love this book so much, and I feel like I've really gotten to know you having read your book.
Thanks. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Let me say one thing. My daughter turned to me and said, "Dad, you should come to more of these. The only time Mom really says nice things about you." Thank you very much for supporting my wife.